Something came up the other day where somebody commented saying that if something is a psychological thriller, then it can't be a horror movie. And I was like, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What scares you, or what doesn't scare you, doesn't mean that it won't scare somebody else. And just because it's a psychological thing doesn't mean that it's not horror. But it got me thinking about the different classes of horror, not the genres. I know that there are different genres of horror: alien movies, zombie movies, ghost movies, and exorcism, that kind of thing. There's different genres, subgenres, and that doesn't mean that they are scary or not scary. What I'm talking about is the class. So within those genres and subgenres, there's a class of horror movie. And I usually only like to talk about this because I don't like making people aware of the third class of horror. Because the third class is just something that I don't think a lot of people need to be exposed to. And in saying that, I was like, well, what are you talking about, James? What are you talking about? Well, the first class of horror, I would say, is this. It's something that has horrific elements in it, like a slasher movie, like a Freddy movie, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. Stuff that's got horrific stuff going on, but it's not, it doesn't scare you, right? It doesn't make you go sleepless at nights watching it. Silence of the Lambs. It's a psychological horror, I would say, because you're dealing with murderers and you see some pretty horrific stuff. And I would say that that's not scary in the sense that you're going to be losing sleep over it, but yeah, it's pretty scary. And that's like my first class of horror. What's something like that in your catalog that you would say, well, yeah, that's scary, but it's not, it's a horror movie for sure. Like Jason Takes Manhattan. I mean, come on, guys. It's a horror movie, but it's not scary. That's my first class of horror. And I think that's fairly common. Let me just make my coffee here. Ooh, that's a mess. Okay. When it comes to the second class of horror is basically, well, it's this. It's a horror movie that actually scares you. How many of those are there? There's probably lots. I mean, and it really depends on your age. It depends on your age, how many movies you've watched that will fall into these classes. These classes are not cement, or they will change with you as you grow throughout your life and as you experience different movies, obviously, right? So a horror movie that scares you. A ghost story. Actually, to tell you the truth, a lot of the religious ones do scare people because if you're religious, if you watch The Exorcism, then that stuff really probably gets at you. But for me, it doesn't. Well, for the most part, horror doesn't really scare me because I know as somebody, I just learned to watch horror. If you realize that it's just people working with the camera, telling a story, my brain just recognizes that. So I'm always looking at things like shot composition, how well is the acting, is the story working? So you take something from Piranha 2, The Spawning, all the way to something that maybe does scare a lot of people, like The Ring, Insidious, movies like that where it's got ghosts or something in there that just totally freaks you out. It's got jump scares, or yeah, that'll always get somebody. It's not necessarily something that'll stick with you, but there are things that will stick with you. If you're a religious person, believe in demons and all that stuff, then yeah, that's your second class of horror right there. But the third class, I don't even know if I should talk about this. Like, for the most part, class 1 and class 2 are stories. They are things that that have a narrative that you can follow along with. And yeah, that's not really uncommon. That's the way movies are supposed to be. They're meant to be some form of entertainment. And that's the key word, right? Entertainment. You're watching something to be entertained, to, take your mind off things and life and reality. Oops. Hold on, guys. Got to take a quick pause here. I got to talk about energies. this is something that has come up also, that if you are living your life through positive and negative energies, like you want to be positive so that you invite that kind of energy back into your life. And a horror movie, watching something which is meant to scare you, is a negative experience. So being immersed in that negativity draws in spirits or just overall bad things. And people believe in that. But that just, it almost augments my idea, my philosophy that of the second class of horror, that when you're not desensitized to something, that, it does scare you, right? You're inviting that energy into your life, and it can stay with you and give you nightmares and just make you feel weird. It doesn't make you feel like your normal self because you feel like you've been violated by this thing. And that goes down to sort of what the base of horror is. Somebody once said that the base of all horror is entrapment. It's being trapped, right? It's being claustrophobic. You're being put in a situation that you don't want to be in, and all you want to do is get out, right? That's the base of all horror. And within that, of course, you have those subgenres, the different types of horror. But it's all about being in a situation that you want to be in that is a negative situation, so you have negativity. And that's just kind of like drawing the distinction between class 1 and class 2 of where you're not afraid of a horror and where you are afraid of a horror, when you allow that negativity to consume you. That's what makes it scary. That's a component of what makes horror scary to you, right? Because you allow that negativity to envelop you. Now, as you know about the way life works, that's just part of your evolution as a human being, to learn to grapple with these emotions. And that's why when I make my points about the third class, that this will really become clear. The third class is kind of like something that doesn't have a narrative. Something that's just maybe a collection of visual stories, and it's usually gruesome stuff, borderline criminal stuff, actual people dying. And you would say, well, how's that really horrific? But the thing is that you don't realize is what's happening when you're watching that kind of stuff. I'm not going to name any titles for movies, but when you watch that stuff, you realize, oh, well, what's the thing about horror? Why isn't Class A scared to me? Or why doesn't that scare me? Because for a certain level of it, you are desensitized to it. You're desensitized to Freddy, Jason, ghosts. You're desensitized to it, so it doesn't really bother you that much. You begin to realize that it's just somebody filming a story and a narrative. Same with number 2. Something that maybe the themes of it are personal to you, and that scares you. But with the third one, you don't want to desensitize yourself to actual real life events and real gruesome imagery. It's hard to describe because there are movies that are just collections of gruesome things happening. And I feel as a person, you can feel yourself change when you watch that, because you're like, I don't know if I ever want to get desensitized to this stuff, because this is real stuff. No, I don't want to. So that's like the third class of horror movie. And there's people who have pushed that boundary and have gone over that boundary. I say no. And that's what I think about when it comes to the 3 classes of horror. And a lot of people just stick in the one, class A and B, or 1 and 2, whatever. What scares you and what doesn't scare you for horror movies. And the third one, I don't think people should venture into that territory for the most part, because it's not useful in evolving yourself as a person. You know what I'm saying? You don't need to see that stuff. Let me know what you thought about this in the comments below. Do you like this kind of riff? Me just kind of ranting? Unscripted?